Hello, my name is Munir Ajam. I'm the founder and CEO of Uruk Project Management. We continue to debate waterfall and agile and some of these concepts online, and confusing agile with agility or agile development with agile project management. So in this short presentation, I want to share with you some thoughts about how to implement or to use the concept of agile. Here we're focusing on the intent of agile and agility in practice. So how can we apply that in practice? We're going to share a model which is the Uruk Platform, and I will explain in few steps. So basically the main focus here is how to lead a product delivery project with agile development. Right? So notice I'm saying agile development, not agile project management. I will elaborate more on this in the next slide. So let's set the scene first. So at least we have a clarity in setting the context. So at least we understand the background behind what we're talking about. We do not believe in something called agile project management. I've spoken about this many times. I've recorded many videos in the past. We participated in many online posts on this subject. We often use the word agile project management, and I know many associations promote that concept, but I think we promote it with a lot of ambiguity and lack of clarity. So what is agile project management? What is an agile project? Right? So in our view, we don't believe there is something called agile project management. We believe in agile, basically what that means in this case is that using agile as a management method. Right? So that's the first point that we want to emphasize. Agile, the way we understand it, as in the manifesto and many other references, is about software development. However, we are willing to expand the definition to say it's okay, product development, where possible. If the product that we want to produce on a project, we can deliver it using Agile, great. And I will touch on this also in the upcoming slide. Another issue we see sometimes, we often confuse or we use Agile to mean agility, which is about being flexible, dynamic, responsive to change. In this case, no argument, agility is a must in our view. It's a must in business, in project management, in strategic planning. No organization can be sustained for the long term by being rigid. Right? Rigid is fragile. So we have to be able to organization to succeed, they have to respond to changes, economic change, political change, whatever the case might be. So in that case, if we're talking about agile and we mean agility, no argument there, right? So our focus here is in agile as in project management or is in development. One more point we want to, before we close this slide, is that competent project management has always been adaptive. And by adaptive, we don't mean agile. Adaptive, that means being adaptive to change, that means the ability to tailor and using concepts such as tailored method, which I will elaborate on now. So let's talk about tailored method. When we say tailored method, what does it mean? The tailored method is a form of being adaptive in project management. In our definition, again, that's our definition. A tailored method is a method, which means when we talk about a method, that means there is some kind of a scientific or systematic approach that goes through a certain sequence or steps or things need to be done. So a tailored method is a method that has to be customized to a sector, domain, or project type. In other words, I cannot use the same way of doing things, same method for managing an oil and gas project versus managing a hotel development project versus managing a marketing or a software development project. So I have to customize the methodology to fit the sector or the domain or the project type that we need to work on. Another thing we want to do is that we like to call adapt the methodology, a tailored method is adapted to project size and complexity. So let's say within the same domain, within the same type of project, let's say oil and gas or real estate, right? Managing a small real estate project, such as building a house, obviously is different than managing a small community or managing a building the city or a mega tower or whatever the case might be. So here we have to adapt, even though the project type and life cycle might look similar, we have to do different practices in order to be able to assume and achieve consistency in our success. One final point here, a tailored method could follow, basically, in addition to being customized to the sector and type and being adapted to the size and complexity, we also have to adjust it to fit the traditional or agile. So we have, and on the next slide, I will talk about how do we decide between traditional or agile. So with that in mind, a tailored method, as we said, these are examples of the product or project lifecycle method that we are building inside the Uruk platform. At this point in time, we have close to 50 methods in the system, and we will continue to modify and update and add as we move forward. For example, this first item we see here is what we like to call a micro project, which is very simple project, 4 stages only, and basically in this case I'll touch on more point around this one, but this is quite simple. In our dictionary in the Uruk platform, this is what we call a micro project. We also have what we call small simple, we have medium moderate complexity, large and complex as well. Now I'm not going to go through all the different settings, because my ultimate objective from this presentation is to show Agile in practice, but I need to continue to set the scene so at least people will understand. The second here is what we call the standard model, but this is tailored toward maybe industrial project, because if you notice there are some terminology here. We use different than the standard method that we have, such as feed stage, which means for those who don't come from this industry, front-end engineering design or preliminary engineering, an EPC stage, engineering, procurement, and construction stage. Basically that's what it means. Here is another one, is very similar situation, but notice the terminology here. I'm using more of the standard or the starting point methodology that we use in the Uruk platform, which is it basically covers these topics. But you can see they are quite similar, maybe with some differences in terminology, and maybe this little symbol over here, which I will discuss next. And then what we have here, if you look at these two on the right, technically they both are for the same type of project. They could be oil and gas project, they could be a real estate development project. The difference between them is that over here we treated the EPC stage as one stage, or design build as one stage, where maybe some organization might issue one big contract to a design build contractor or an EPC contractor, or we could divide it into 3 stages or 2 stages. In this example, we are showing 3 stages. So you've noticed, and again, what we're trying to show in this case here, we are just trying to show the concept of tailored method in the real world. How do we, and what are some of the ways we can tailor things? Obviously, we can change the terminology, we can change the name of all these stages, depend on the industry. For example, feed stage, this is a common term we use on the oil and gas industrial project. And real estate development, that could be an architectural design stage. And maybe infrastructure projects, this could be called preliminary engineering stage. And software development, it might be called a product plan or product roadmap, whatever the case might be. We can adjust the names and we can adjust the number of stages, and as a result of that, we can also adjust the number of gates. One last point here, you notice this little symbol I said I'll talk about. Basically, we are using the symbol in Uruk, and obviously all of these screenshots are from the Uruk platform, to indicate that in this stage we are using agile development. So basically we're using incremental or iterative development. So depend on the nature of the project. That brings us to the question we raised earlier. I said, okay, how do we decide between traditional and agile development? Here we go. The way we decide, with the begin with the end in mind, which means the end in our case in project management is the product that the project needs to deliver. We talk about the output and outcome. Let's not get into that debate for now. Just at least think about the final output or the product that we need to produce as a project. And if we start to think with that, and we can follow the life cycles that I shared with you earlier in the early stages. So once we conclude the front end, which means those early stages and that we talk with that on the life cycle, and I can explain them more in the next slide. And here we start with the end in mind, said, okay, that the product, let's think about the product. Can the product be delivered in pieces or only as a whole? Which means if I'm building a home, obviously there is no benefit for me to give me the foundation or the walls. I need the whole home. So in that case, basically what we need, we can work on the project. We can work, obviously we work on site prep, foundation, whatever, all these steps we do. But ultimately, there is no benefit for me as an owner, okay, as the owner of the house, or the owner of that product, until you give it to me ready to live in. So I can basically get the keys, open the door, move my furniture, and live, right? So there is no value for me in that. In that case, if I can only deliver the product as a whole, we call that big bang development. Obviously, some of you might call it traditional, and some of you might even call it waterfall, which we don't agree with the terminology, but that's another subject. So basically, let's call it big bang or traditional. Again, feel free to call it what you want. That typically, which means we need to design, we need to procure, we need to engineer, we need to construct, we need to commission until we are finished the whole thing together. Yes, we build it in pieces, and that's what we call work packages. But at the end of the day, my only benefit, the value to me as a customer, as the owner, is when you give me the whole thing in one piece. However, if the product can be delivered in pieces, for example, a software project, a course, or whatever the case might be, a study that could be developed in pieces, that means I can develop, and in this case, for us, a clear distinction, right? Remember, foundation I can build in one piece, but that's not the intent. The intent is the piece that I build. The piece that I build, I reiterate here, is I can hand it over to the customer so the customer can start use it. That is a clear distinction we follow in Uruk project management, right? So pieces, that mean not I'm building them and putting them in in the storage or the library or the code library. No, I'm building, and so I analyze, design, build, test, release to be used. Obviously, it could be released to be used for internal product in a company, or it obviously released to people, to customers, so I can start to sell it, right? Such as, again, the example I will give you about the Uruk platform in the next slide. In that situation, obviously, I can use Agile development, and in this case, it could be iterative, incremental, or both. We could actually sometimes, most likely it is both, right? And actually, most likely in some situation is all three together. So basically, like for example, in software project, building the MVP might be done in pieces, right? But ultimately, I cannot go to market with it. If I want to measure it based on market performance, I cannot go to market with it until the MVP is ready to go to market. So that could have been what we call traditional or big bang. But once I go to market, or at least I have a product available to be used, in that case, I will continue doing enhancement, meaning iteration, or adding functionalities, which mean increment, right? That's how we define things, to try to simplify things. And obviously with that, once we decide what type of work we want to do, we can proceed. And Uruk allow us to do any of these. So now it is with all, I know, a few minutes to explain the context, the setting. So now let's go, and we'll probably spend at least 10 minutes or more in this area here. Let's talk about an example of Agile in practice, the way we see it, right? Again, we are giving our perspective, the perspective we are using to build the Uruk platform. So I will be sharing the way we are building the platform and as a project as an example. So what happened at every stage? And some of this was triggered by a lot of questions from a colleague of ours, Mr. Larry Moore, and I answered his question on LinkedIn via a long post. Over here, this maybe will be able to elaborate more because he asked a few questions about some of these stages. So in this case, I want to share basically what happened in every stage. Now, again, before I go into this is a standard model. And you remember we already established that the standard model that we are using here is an example. On some project, you could have less stages, and meaning less gate. In some project, you can have more, right? For example, in a lot of small, simple project, I could combine the concept stage and the feasibility stage in one stage. I can combine the requirement and the strategy, or the strategy and the definition. Right? So we can do some combination. In some project, the operational readiness stages and initial operation may not exist. They could be part of implementation, right? So your life cycle and your real world and your real context could be different than this. But again, the steps that I will be describing apply everywhere, whether you have 3 stages or you have 10 stages. So let's talk about each one of them. Okay, I need to move this handsome guy from here. And the concept stage. What do we do on the concept stage? All right. And the concept stage, we can do too many things. I mean, right now, the concept stage in the Uruk platform has about 6 or 7 points to be answered. However, in simplified terms, 3 things need to happen here. Why? What is the business case, the justification for the project, the problem or the opportunity we're trying to solve, right? What the product vision and how does it align to the organization strategy? Now, I'm going to share with you generic answers, and then I'll give you something specific to Uruk. For us, for Uruk platform, when we decide to build it, why are we building it? Because we see a major problem in our industry, a lot of confusion about project management. We see a high degree of project management failures, and often project management failure is causing the project to fail, which means some projects are terminated early, or they're completed but nobody care about them and nobody use their product. So the project or the product failed to achieve its objective. So for us, when we decide to develop Uruk, because we felt there is a need for something like this in the market. Now, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but basically, this is the concept. That is the business case, the problem we are trying to solve. What the product vision? The product vision is to develop a solution to include the 4 Ps, what we call the 4 Ps, which mean product, project, program, and portfolio. So we want to develop a solution that seamlessly integrate the management of product delivery, project management, program management and portfolio management. And we started now with the project management element. It's available for use today. And as we continue to build, we build the rest of the component. So that is more or less a high-level product vision. All I need to do right now, I cannot, at this concept stage, we cannot go and design or develop a product roadmap. We can basically have a high-level vision of what do we envision the Uruk platform to be 2, 3, 5, 10 years in the future, right? And then strategic alignment, obviously in this case, Uruk exists to develop the platform. So obviously this is core to our strategy, right? And that's it. We produce a document called project brief. And basically that project brief outline these items. And again, the project brief, by definition, the word brief, that means short, is basically should be, even on $1 billion project, we've seen project brief no longer than 1 page, right? Because we're not talking about product design here. We're not talking about product roadmap. We're not talking about all that detail. This is a lot of misconception between people, Agilists, who promote themselves as an anti-waterfall or waterfall fail, right? I know many of you, when you saw this, you immediately saw this is a waterfall. It is not. Waterfall doesn't exist in project management. It's not logical. This is a truly adaptive product delivery management. So basically, it's about delivering a product from a project owner perspective, not a contractor, not a software developer, from an owner. I am an owner, I need to develop, obviously in this case, Uruk, the company is the owner of the Uruk platform. So I'm using that perspective, right? So from that perspective, that is what the first thing we need to do. It's just a very high level concept. And then we have a gate, we have a decision point. So does it make sense? So here, for me, my colleagues, my friend, my co-founders, before we formed the company, said, does it make sense to do this? Yes. Do we believe there is a market need? Yes. And so forth. So why? Let's agree to move forward. However, we are one of the few people that I know that we separate the business case from feasibility stage. A lot of people combine them. We think, no, business case, that means there is a need for the product. So what's the feasibility? The feasibility is, can we deliver that product successfully? Do I have the capability as a company to do this? And I can tell you, maybe it's not a secret, some people would know this. Many years ago, actually, I started to work on Uruk 12 years. We didn't call it Uruk in those days. We call it Camp App. 11 years ago. In those days, I was working in Dubai, and we go to companies, we need funding, said, you're in a service company, we don't fund service company. Ouch. Okay. Well, we are going to develop a tech product. Still, you're a service company, go away. Right? So with that in mind, basically, we couldn't, obviously, we didn't have the capacity, the capabilities, the money to do the project. So we killed it. A few years ago, we revived it. I was in Lebanon. I tried to get funding. Banks, no idea about what project management is all about. Startup ecosystem in Lebanon in those days, or even in the UAE, it was miserable. So basically, it was not feasible for us to develop this project. Yes, there is a need for it. We know there is a need, but I don't have the capacity. I did not have the financial capability to deliver that product. So that idea was put to sleep. Until a few years ago, a few friends and I decided, now we can proceed. We can actually collect some money from each other and start the company and start to do it. So we did a feasibility study, and we start to look at the possibility. Can we do this? Do we have the capacity, the experience, the capabilities, the money? Obviously, we don't have all the money, but we have something to start with. Therefore, we decided, yes, that is a project. It's feasible. It has market demand. There is a need for it. We understood the risks. We understood our capabilities, the people involved. So it was a gate to decision, go. And I came to the US in June 2019, and we registered the company here in the US. So that I'm showing you was elaboration and quite a bit of detail to show exactly how a life cycle would look like. That is not waterfall. Yes, there are some sequence, there are some decision point, right? And so far it looked like 100% sequential, but in reality it's not, because some things are happening. Because while we are doing the feasibility, I was already doing requirement and other things as well. So there are some parallel or some overlapping between these stages, which we are not showing in this image, because it's flexible and you can do it the way you want on project. So now we start working on the project, and in a way we start to work on the requirement and the strategy together. How are we going to do this project? What is our strategy? But let me explain each one of them before I go into how did we do it. So typically a requirement stage would mean what? Define the business requirement, the stakeholder input, expectation, product breakdown structure. These are some of the things that we were doing in communication with my partner, in communication with some of the initial shareholder we have or co-founders. And we talked about potentially what our understanding from the market need are. So we start to look at the business requirement and to define the business requirement and to develop what we call a project requirement document. And basically that outline our partnership agreement and many other things as well. Then here we talk about the strategy stage. Strategy stage in general about the project strategy. How are we going to define the work? How are we going to develop product roadmap? How are we going to implement the work? What best practices might apply? and ultimately leading to a project management plan. So this is more about managing the rest of the project. Now, I am in the middle here, right? We already reached the middle of this life cycle. Why am I talking about project management plan now? Why didn't I do it before? I did not have enough information before. Now we have enough information. Somebody would say, well, isn't it too late? No, because if you think about it, in terms of a timeline, that probably would have, this work would have probably taken 6 months, a year, few months, whatever the case might be. However, in terms of money, we are not really spending much money because we're still on paper, right? Most of the money come in implementation, where we need to hire, we need a development team, we need a lot of work to be done, we need offices, well, and many other things. So that is where the real costs are. So yes, time-wise, we might have maybe have to, or maybe 20, 30, 40% of the time has lapsed. However, money-wise, we did not spend much money. So this is why it's good to stop at this point in time and look at the future of the project all the way to the end, right? And this is in a way we are doing maybe updated cost estimate. We are verifying, maybe we're not redoing the feasibility, but we might be updating the feasibility, at least preliminary, until we reach the definition stage, which is gate 5. In this case, we call it the point of no return. Now, what does that mean, the point of no return? That typically mean once we decide to proceed, that's where we really start to spend a lot of money. We hire a contractor, depend on the nature of the project, obviously, especially in engineering construction. So most likely, we will never cancel a project after gate 5. Now, the word never says the word never, right? Because that's not always the rule, because often enough, we've canceled project and implementation. Companies, they are mega projects that have been canceled once, even when they're starting to implement them, and millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars were spent. So in that perspective, usually though, once we make decision at gate 5, that means that's it. We are gonna get secure funding for the project and proceed. So here we start doing details about scope, the quality, the cost, the schedule, design, preliminary engineering. Again, depend on the nature of the project. For us in Uruk, basically most of this work ultimately lead to a product roadmap. How do we envision Uruk to look like? And of course, coming up with some kind of a timeline, for example, and obviously those timeline has to be with a lot of contingency built into them, because there are a lot of ambiguity in these type of project. So we cannot develop a detailed plan and stick to it. What we need to develop, we put more like a good vision of a plan, the product roadmap, and the approximate time will take us to develop each piece of that roadmap. So we develop a schedule, we develop a cost estimate, we develop budget. And again, I want to stop maybe here and emphasize, what I hate the most often sometimes is a lot of argument and debate online. In Agile, we don't need schedule. In Agile, we don't need cost estimate. I'm not gonna say some bad words here. We need some guideline. If you don't have a roadmap and you don't have some guideline and boundaries, if money is not an object, okay, time is not an object, no big deal. Go ahead, do whatever you want. However, in reality, companies get bankrupt if we don't set some boundaries. So we need to have some boundaries. Now here in project management, we are not talking about rigid boundaries. We're not talking about set in stone guideline. Or we need agility, right? Agility means being flexible, being adaptive. So what we do in this case, we develop what we can. We develop a high-level vision of the product. For us in Uruk, actually, the whole vision, the product roadmap, we actually divided it into 7 major project or program, if you want even, right? And that could become a case study to discuss in another time. However, in this case, we're trying to explain the methodology in general. So basically, we develop a high-level plan, semi-detailed, with an idea of product roadmap, with the rough cost, a rough schedule, and allowing plenty of contingency in order to allow the flexibility. With this, once we make a decision and how to fund this project and And in the startup world, funding happen at multiple stages. So let's talk about developing the app, using this project as developing the MVP for the Uruk platform. We move to implementation. Implementation is where we mobilize the software development team. We start to do design, prototyping, using wireframes, and ultimately moving forward to developing the proof of concept through coding and testing until we have a product ready to start to use. Now notice, and this is one of the questions, that why operational readiness is not part of implementation. Well, typically in most projects, or many projects, let's put it that way, the skills and the type of people that need to work on implementation is different than the type of people that need to work on operational readiness stages. And this is why they are in parallel and they are not combined. So now let's talk about software project, Uruk platform, right? What does operation readiness mean? For a software solution that we intend to go to market with it and sell it with a minimum viable product, obviously, in this case, we need to develop the marketing strategies, the sales strategy, other business setup. Obviously, in our case, we already legally set up. But if there's any other legal aspect, for example, for fundraising, we need to have the pricing model. We need to have many other things. And this is the business people do it, right? So here, obviously the coders, the developer, the quality guys working on the implementation of the platform, while the business people working ready. If we don't do this now at gate 5, if we don't start doing it now, what does it mean? We finish implementation, we have a product, but we have not done any marketing or preparation to sell it, or have no idea about pricing model, which means the product could be ready to go, and we are still, chaotically wasting time 2, 3, 4 months, not knowing what to do or not how to sell. So a good project management to ensure success is while the development team in engineering construction project, the construction team is working, we need to be ready for the operation. And in this case, the word operation readiness is basically, I can call it GTM, or go to market strategy, right? The getting ready to market, exactly what that is in a software project. In engineering construction, typically I will be getting ready to start operating the facility. After that, I'll go into initial operation, which is, again, in a software project, that could be piloting, that could be beta testing, free trials, trying to identify the product market fit, ultimately leading to final acceptance that yes, we have a product, we have a good product, and we can start selling and selling subscription to the product and generating revenue, so we can continue building the other part of the product roadmap. And once all said and done, we start to do closing the stage. I know this is an intensive slide that I spent a lot of time and energy talking about it, because this is basically, we need to focus on what could happen in every step. And I gave the example of a software project because most people think software project, we have Agile. I have been online for years asking people that when they talk about Agile project management, could you please show me a life cycle model for an Agile project? I don't know how many times I ask, many of other colleagues have asked the same question, and no one could ever. They keep telling us, no, we can use Agile across for managing project. And some people will even use, we can use Agile in construction. Yet when we ask for an example of a life cycle, nobody can do it. Now, obviously, if you consider the implementation stage, which is the software development stage, as a project, then yeah, sure, you can use Agile. But again, are we using Agile management or Agile development techniques? Let's be clear about this. Therefore, I conclude is that in our view, this is Agile in practice. This is not waterfall. This is not hybrid. A lot of these fancy words we've been coming up with. This is a adaptive project management. life cycle wise, the early stage, which we call them the front end, usually up to gate 5. Remember in the previous slide when I said decide between agile and agile development or traditional development, usually regardless what type of project you work on, whether it's incremental, iterative, traditional, whatever you want to call it, the early stages that we've seen here, 1, 2, 3, 4, right, and maybe partially 5, are the same, whether you want to do traditional project management, big bang development, or you want to use iterative incremental. In all cases, I need to define a concept. I need to understand if it's feasible. I need to know what the business requirements are, right? And I need to have an idea about the project management plan, again, with boundaries, right? We don't have fixed plan. This is a mess. This is a mess. We don't have detailed plan, and then we must put our feet to the fire to comply with those plans. We plan in every stage enough to allow us to go to the next stage, and in every stage we plan the work of the stage itself, and we move forward. That's important, regardless what type of development approach you are using. Now, somebody can tell me, well, can't I use agile concept in the feasibility stage? Well, tell me what are the agile concept. If they are about, doing work in pieces, we do work in pieces. We call it work packages. Is it about planning as we move forward? We have that. We call it rolling wave planning, right? So what is agile adding to the concept here, except the idea of iterative incremental development? I would love for somebody to correct me or challenge me, or even we can go online and do a webinar in a debate format. Although we've had these kind of debate before, still we're open to debating any of this information, or how do we manage project in an adaptive way. So in this case, if it is incremental, iterative, like what this symbol shows, we have increment. One of our Uruk one of the projects we're working on has 7 increment. Okay, other project could have 10 increment. Some other project could have 3 increment. Right? And by the way, we are using the same kind of concept for a marketing project right now. And in this case, we are dividing the increment in marketing is basically, for example, web, social media, email marketing. We're treating each one of those pieces as an increment, and so because each piece is somewhat independent of the other, and they all link to each other in a way, but we are using the same principle on a marketing project. We've used the same principle on participating in the PMI Global Summit to exhibit there. We use the same principle. Obviously, in those situations, the projects are much simpler, much shorter, and of course, in those cases, we combine some of these stages, but that is the principle of adaptive, competent project management. With this, I come to the end, and I say thank you. Would love to invite you to join us in the Uruk community. You can join us with as a trial plan. Obviously, you can. We'll be happy to talk to your organization to consider subscribing to Uruk. But we also have what we call community initiative that we have launched. We launched Uruk Grant program already. We launched it last year. Toward the end of the year, we launched the Solo PM program. And within a matter of days, we will be launching the Women PM program. Actually, all of these programs are already on our website. You can start getting some information about them. And hopefully in the second quarter this year, we will be launching what we call the Veterans Program. And again, all of these programs, whenever you see here as under the label of the Uruk community, these would be free of charge program that we offer as part of our community service or community building in order to provide organization or individual like the Solo PM or women that want to maybe acquire some new skills to get back to the job market. Is basically we have these programs. So check our website. You will find these programs there. Obviously, though, we cannot do these programs if we don't have the support of our community in terms of helping us reach investors. Because right now we are doing a seed round. We are looking for investment, and we are in communication with a couple of venture capital firms right now to lead our seed round, and we will be looking for angel and accredited investors as well, or help us gain access to potential introduction to client. If you are introducing us to your organization, that will be something that win-win. If you have some potential contact, you want to introduce us to someone else, not your organization, we have an incentive program we can share as well. So we basically to invite people to help us acquire our services. Also, we have what we call the Uruk Business Network. Is a commercial partnership program with people around, with companies around the world. We already have one contract signed with a company in Oman, and we are looking forward in discussion with other potential partners around the world. Sorry for the last couple of minutes, we're focusing on the business aspect, but we wanted to highlight. Unfortunately, every time I start a presentation, I think it's going to be a short presentation or a short video. It ends up being long. Forgive me, 41 minutes, time to have a great time. We wish you success today, tomorrow, and always.